I'm Allan Cogan. Join me as I tour the country tasting different whiskeys and discussing the craft of distillation with local distillers, whiskey lovers, and even those who are new to the culture of spirits. Welcome to the Cogan Conversation. For this episode, I traveled to northern Wisconsin to hit up the Northern Waters Distillery in Minocqua. They call it the North Woods, and it is a beautiful spot. I talked to their head distiller, Jake Walish, all about his craft and what he does as a distiller. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Cheers. Well, Jake, thanks for having me. The Northern Waters Distillery on site in the distillery. I haven't been here, and I've had your whiskey before, so it's a privilege to be here, and I really appreciate you welcoming me in to your home and doing this for me.
Hey, like I say to everybody that comes on a tour for the first time, I make people introduce themselves, which is kind of an icebreaker for me because I get just as nervous as anybody else does having a first-time conversation. But it's kind of funny the reactions you get out of people. They're looking at each other like, I really have to say my name, you know? But, you know, and then I say, you know, who's been here before? And it's a show of hands. And for the ones that haven't, it's always welcome to Northern Waters Distillery. My name's Jake, and let's have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So how long have you actually been doing this at the distillery?
I've been a year and a half here.
Okay.
Our founders, Peter and Lisa, they brought me on, would be last May. So we're coming on that year and a half now. Since have sold the facility, and I stayed on with the new ownership.
Cool.
And it's been just kind of a trial by fire, and grew up with it. It's been fun.
Yeah, absolutely. How does someone get into distilling? How did you find your place here? And I mean, what does it mean to be here for you?
For me, it was an absolute stroke of luck. I was born and raised in the area. I grew up about 45 minutes north of here in Northern Waters, went to Lakeland High School, graduated in 2000. So this was always home for me.
Sure.
So on weekend trips and visits, I remember looking for there's a smoke shop in town that has some of the best ribs. And I remember me and Dad going on a weekend trip and going, hey, we need some barbecue. So we went to the location where the barbecue joint was, and we walked in and it wasn't there. And it was Peter standing behind the counter with this big smile on his face. He goes, welcome to Northern Waters Distillery. And me and Dad kind of looked at him like, where's the smoke shop? And he's like, oh, this is a new distillery. We just opened this up, and do you want to try some whiskey? And we went, yeah, you know,
of course.
It's not smoked meat, but it's whiskey. It's just as good, right?
Right.
So, you know, my track record kind of took me out of here in the year 2000, graduated Lakeland High School, moved over to Menominee, went to UW Stout. I studied there for 6 years. I got my bachelor's degree in hospitality, tourism, restaurant management.
Oh, cool.
Moved to Wausau after that. I was the banquet sales coordinator at Hereford Hops for 2 years. It's kind of a grill your own kind of steakhouse. Mm-hmm. I guess Wisconsin's got a couple other places, like the Prime Quarter. I think it's still one.
Sure.
It was very similar to what we had. And that just kind of got me into working the restaurant industry again. I kind of always grew up in it. I had different jobs up here as a dishwasher, prep cook, line cook at little places up here. And it kind of got me back to my roots a little bit.
Very cool.
So that was a 2-year stint, and then the place ended up sadly going out of business. Mm-hmm. And then just absolute luck, a merchandiser job came for a liquor wholesaler by the name of Badger Liquor, based out of Fond du Lac.
Yep.
And I applied for it, and I was a merchandiser for 4 months, just pretty much chasing trucks around and putting stuff on the shelves and getting used to brands and labels. And after that 4-month stint, the sales route became available in Marshfield, and I applied for it and got into it, and had the boss at the time literally throw a route list on my lap and said, "You're a smart kid, you'll figure it out." So it was kind of a bittersweet thing. You know, you got the job, and then it was like, oh no, I got the job. Right? It was an instant panic. You know, I knew the brands, but didn't know how to sell it.
Sure.
I was really good at putting it on the shelves and moving cases, you know, the grunt work, but meeting customers face to face, and then having to ask your current customer where the next place is down the road.
Right.
I mean, that's how I learned the route.
Sure.
And at the beginning it was 163 customers.
Wow.
So it ended up being kind of a cool thing, but ended up being a 15-year career.
Yeah.
A lot of death by PowerPoint, you know, learning everything about the liquor industry and the distilling industry.
I know how that is.
Yeah. I got to go to Kentucky a couple times on incentive trips. Been up to Windsor, Canada, up to Hiram Walker Palace. That was fantastic. You know, it's kind of the birthplace of Canadian Club and kind of the bootleggers up here.
Sure.
You know, that's where they were coming from, running down 51.
Yeah.
So actually seeing kind of how that all worked out and how the Northwoods played into that it was like seeing a little bit of home.
Yeah.
You got to see the whole story. It all came around. So after 15 years there, Peter and Lisa decided that they wanted a new distiller. I ended up applying for it, and once again, got lucky and got the opportunity.
Wow.
So it's been great.
Well, have you learned on the job, or did you have to do any kind of pre-training for that?
100% on the job.
Okay.
Yeah, 100% of the job. When I first got the job, you think about different titles, you look up master distiller and it says, what does it take to be a master distiller? I mean, I remember Googling that and seeing what that was. And it says, there really isn't a definition.
Nope.
It's just kind of it's not a catchphrase, but it's a title. It's kind of handed down,
Right.
You earn it.
Right.
And I have people that ask me on a tour, oh, hey, we get to see the master distiller. I'm the head distiller, but not the master. There's so much to learn, So it's, I don't want to be pigeonholed by it either. We have one thing that we say here, and the founder kind of said it in the beginning, that we're very confident in our processes and our procedures here.
Mm-hmm.
We're also very confident that those processes and procedures are going to change because with the induction of technology, things change so fast.
Sure.
A new yeast strain, a new way to work a product, a new way to make a bourbon, a little bit different cook. If you're not always learning in this thing, you're just not doing it right, I don't think.
Sure. Well, I think that's one of the reasons why I like coming to places like this and talking to people like you at a small craft distillery, because there's so much more, it feels more TLC that's put into the whiskey making. I mean, I can hear it in your voice. You love what you do. You take care of what you do. And it's not just another product. It's a craft, right? It's not just a large corporation making some kind of commodity. It's a thing that you have a hand on and you love it. So walk me through how do you do this? How do you start with distilling at a craft distillery?
Thank God I had a good basis. We had with Pete being here, and I'm not saying it like he was just a golf pro, but he was just a golf pro, and he'll even say it. And how did you get into distilling? How did you get into you wanting to own a distillery?
Right.
And his answer was, I like whiskey. So it's a simple answer, but it's a genuine answer. I liked whiskey. So he went through the growing pains of kind of learning what worked and what didn't for the things we make here. So I kind of got the raw materials kind of handed to me.
Gotcha.
So the basic procedures were here. The basic principles of what we wanted to do were here. They're going on their 10th year. We're going on our 10th year here. So it's a great thing for a small, I talk about a small business being successful. 10 years. I don't know how often you hear that anymore.
Right.
A little small operation, especially in the distilling world when it's just monsters around you.
Absolutely.
And to say in little northern Wisconsin, we got 10 years in the distilling industry, it's really cool. I think it's something to definitely hang your hat on.
Well, especially with how things have happened in the world recently with the pandemic and things that have shuttered small businesses, you guys have
hand
persevered.
sanitizer, man.
Hand sanitizer. And I love that because a lot of craft distilleries survived on doing that and
Right.
pioneering that, and that's so ingenious.
Right.
So, I mean, kudos to you for being able to be a part of that. But
Absolutely. And that's the other thing about being craft. I explain on my tours, people say, what makes you different? And it's an easy answer. It's literally everything.
Sure.
From when I talk about procedure, it's kind of, I guess it's just kind of glazing over it, but it really is. It's literally everything's different. We have 600 pounds of grain in a mash versus the industry's got thousands of pounds of grain.
Right.
Continuous distill processes, everything automated. You hardly ever see anybody in the buildings when you go on these big tours. So when you walk in and we call, you can kind of explain what the tasting room looks like, but it's a giant piece of glass.
Yeah.
And we talk about it being in the fishbowl.
Right.
Because it really is. You're in there, and it doesn't matter if you're walking across gracefully or you catch your foot on a hose going across the room, you're going down and everybody's seeing you. So I guess on that aspect of it, it's the double-edged sword. You can look really cool or really stupid really fast. But you get to see the entire operation and actually seeing people working it. And the cool part, and that's why I say that we're craft, is if we want to change something just a little bit, change up our mash bill, change a procedure, we want to throw a different flavor malt in, change up our corn, volume versus our wheat or our rye. It doesn't have to be the same every time.
Sure.
When you talk about the big guys, when you grab a national bottle off the shelf, you expect it to be that bottle, that flavor profile every time you grab it. It doesn't matter how many times you grab it, it's going to be the same. But what keeps us interesting here, and I think you're going to see when we do some of our tastings, that our limited releases and even our base bourbons, they can be different every time. And that's the fun part about it. That's the cool part about it.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions I was going to ask you is how free do you feel to experiment and play around with things? Because that's one of my favorite things about whiskey is just going into the untenured, valley of what we don't know.
The best answer we have is why not?
Yes, why not?
Why not? You ask, you think it's something stupid, and you don't know until it's an absolute dismal failure.
Right.
But we have a wall of shame or wall of fame. We got some really cool things up there from over the years. We got some really terrible things up there.
Sure.
But you don't know until you try it. And I think being the craft side, we have that opportunity to try that, where maybe some of the big guys don't.
Absolutely.
If you're looking at a white and black label, that's got to be the same every time. We don't have to worry about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you being way up here in Minocqua, Wisconsin, more north than I'm from. I'm from Milwaukee, right? But I spent a lot of time up in Door County area. I love northern Wisconsin. I've been in Minocqua before, but I've never been here. I was in Minocqua at an age when I could not be here. But what does a small town mean to the distillery? How much of an impact do you have on the community? Do you guys have events here? Do you give your spent grain to local farmers? Are you sourcing local grains from farmers in the area? How does that all work?
Right. So that's another big thing for us. We try to source as much of it locally as we can.
Cool.
Our primary farmer is Northern Tier, group out of Rhinelander. And it's a couple guys that had a couple fields made corn. And the way I was told the story by Pete is these guys wanted to buy a mill.
Yeah.
And it's another one of those things, why not? Let's try it. So they milled the product and they brought it to Pete and said, if this is something you guys can make into whiskey. Sure. We don't know. Maybe. Maybe it'd be the best thing we've ever had. Maybe it'd be the worst thing we ever had. But it turned out it was fantastic. It gives a good yield, a good tasting whiskey. They also do our wheat. They do our rye. So a lot of local there. Our sweetening agents, we like to use honey and maple syrup. And those are local producers. What else do we get? Cranberry juice.
Oh, wow.
So all of our cranberry-based spirits come from Lake Nokomis Cranberry. We get raw cranberry juice come the spring of the year, and it goes into our cranberry vodka, our cranberry gin, and our cranberry moonshine. So we try to do that locally. Breeze is our malting. That's right out of central Wisconsin.
Wow.
Then we have concentrates with blackberry and blueberry that kind of come from the industry, but for the most part, a lot of our stuff stays as much locally as we can. Our spent grains go to one of our farmers up in Butternut. He feeds his cows and his pigs with it, that he uses for his business, for his slaughter. He's got a butcher shop and all that kind of stuff, and swears it's the best meat. I got some on order, so we'll see. But that's Heritage Meats, and he does his feeding there. So yeah, trying to be as local as possible. Try to do. I don't think we do anything artificial. Our flavoring agents are honey, maple syrup, agave syrup. Our colors come natural from our fruits and vegetables. We don't use any artificial coloring in there, so it's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, that's awesome. When this distillery first started, and I know you weren't there, but do you know, did they start with their own product, or did they do MGP sourcing to start off?
Nope. And as we go through our tasting, I'll kind of show you. Pete definitely adopted the process of your white spirits pay your bills.
Yeah.
As you're working through the system. So moonshine was the start. An original moonshine, don't have to age it. If you do it right, it doesn't taste like gasoline. It's a pretty good spirit.
Yeah.
And then flavoring, it's easy. Apple juice makes apple pie. Lemonade makes, a lemon-based moonshine. Cranberry juice changes that a little bit. So yeah, his white spirits paid the bills while the good stuff was aging.
Awesome.
And I like a story I tell. We have customers in here all the time. I said, I wasn't the first customers. One of the first customers for Northern Waters. One of the first customers. I said, that's really cool. How do you prove that? You can't prove it.
I have a punch card.
Right. But I got one better. My dad and I, we have been collecting bourbon throughout the years, with me being a salesman for so many. It was pretty easy to get.
Sure.
Bourbon used to be easy to get, and the good stuff used to be easy to get, or what we thought was good stuff. Right. So we went through the liquor cabinet, and I found an original bottle of Jimmy's Room bourbon, and just because we hand label every bottle, and we hand finish them with the proof signature and the age verification and all that. And I turned that bottle around. It was barrel number 1, bottle number 2. So maybe I can say I was one of the first customers, or at least one of the first bourbon buyers. So
Sure.
That's kind of fun.
That's really cool. And you have Jimmy's Room bourbon now too, right?
Yep, Jimmy's Room bourbon. It's our house bourbon.
Okay.
We kind of do it in two different aspects. We have our rail supply for there that runs about 80 proof, and our retail's 86.
Okay.
3 years old. We don't cheat it. I mean, if it's not 3 years, it stays in the barrel until it gets there.
Sure.
That's one thing I kind of pride myself in, and kind of support the big industry. If it's not of age, it's not something we can just blend to make better. If we want it to be 3 years and that's the flavor profile and that's the maturation we want out of it, we let it sit.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So I just tried just a little bit ago your new Porter's Rye. That was phenomenal. And then I think I have a bourbon on my shelf from years ago. I don't know how old the bottle is, but it's the Northern Waters bourbon. It's just on the basic label.
Yep, that'd be our Jimmy's Room then.
That's the Jimmy Room?
Yep.
Okay, I wasn't sure. It's great stuff. But speaking of whiskey, walk me through these samples that we have in front of us, because I am going to start drooling if we don't taste them soon.
So I learned from an old guy, my first trip to Kentucky. He said he'd been selling whiskey a long time at that point. And he said, as soon as you go to a distillery, and this is kind of something I've taken as, I guess, kind of like my whiskey Bible, my Bible 101, however you want to look at it, is if you want to see where a distillery is at, check out their white goods first.
Yeah.
For us, it's our original moonshine. I got a sample of our white good. This is 155 right off the still. This is our bourbon mash. So, it's hot, right? It's 155 proof, but even when that hotness kind of dissipates, it's still that sweet corn.
Sure.
And it mellows out smooth. It just shows where your cuts are and where you're paying attention, where it's important. We're able to put out a 3-year-old bourbon because it's really good at 3 years. And I think that's because we pay attention to our cuts in the beginning. We're using a premium ingredient to start. Mm-hmm. We don't have the fantastic water like Kentucky does, but our old water's pretty good. It's pretty clean. It's pretty neutral. It's not adding any foul flavors or profiles to it.
Sure.
So going through, the white spirit, I think, is important. You can see where distillery's at. Then after that, it's going to be our baseline Jimmy's Room bourbon. That's our rail presentation at 80 proof.
Okay.
And then going down the line, our limited releases. The first one I'm going to have for you is we do a double barrel program here. We'll take immature whiskey. It's about 2 years old. Some of it ends up being rail stuff, or mostly for like transfer barrels is what we call it. And we work with wine producers, beer producers, and maple syrup producers, and we'll get those barrels out in market. Rocky Reef down in Woodruff is a group that works with us where they'll age their beer in one of our bourbon casks for 12 to 18 months.
Yeah.
But then we want that barrel back.
Yeah.
Because then we can play with them for a second time. So we might lose the bourbon moniker because it's just it doesn't fit the rule set anymore.
Right.
But it still gives us a really unique proud. So our number 3 is going to be the buckshot. That's going to be a beer finished. Number 4 is going to be the bird shot, which is wine finished. And then one I think you're pretty excited about is our double barrel spring fever, and that's our maple syrup cask finished.
Yes.
Yeah, that's like cheating. Just going to warn you.
I'm a sweet tooth, so
yeah, that's going to do it.
Well, very cool. Tell me about your general mash. I know, is it a high corn, or do you do any high rye?
We do. Our base is people always ask, "What's your mash bill?" You don't have to hide it.
Right.
It's 400 pounds of corn, 100 pounds of wheat, 50 pounds of malted wheat, and 50 pounds of malted barley. So it's really easy. But it's just the technique is what's there.
Sure.
So I think a simple mash, but then we can tweak it. If we want to hit it with some rye, we do have a high rye bourbon that we make. Cut the wheat out, raise the rye, raise the wheat. If we want to, we've actually done some different, some malts. We have a caramel and a chocolate malt that's sitting in barrel in the back.
Oh, wow.
That's going to be fun. I mean, it was candy going in the barrel. I don't know what it's going to do when it matures, but
it's syrup.
Yeah, it's maybe be a really good a bitters base for the bar, maybe.
Sure. That's awesome. Well, shall we?
Yep, absolutely.
All right. So White Dog first.
White Dog first.
Cheers, man.
Prost.
Appreciate it. Well, that's hot, but it's sweet.
And that's what I'm talking about when you're talking about where is it going to start.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one of the sweetest White Dogs I've ever had.
You're not kidding. That's like candy.
It's perfect, right? Wow. I just think that's why you can get that 3-year-old finish, because the start of it is so nice.
I was going to say, because I mean, you see a lot of 7, 8+ year bourbons that aged bourbon that makes me ask, have you ever tried aging it further? And from what this tastes like, why would you?
I think Wisconsin's lucky in the respect that we have the volatile seasons. Mm-hmm. It makes those barrels work for us a little harder. So maybe we're getting, and I've heard about the Wisconsin style whiskey or the Wisconsin style bourbon before, and just experience it working at this distillery. I see it. I've had 8s and 10s and, the 12s, and some even the big high age scotches. And I think our 3-year-old holds up pretty well because our base spirit is so nice. I mean, that thing is just, for 155 and that sweet, that's pretty nice.
I'm asking for a friend, but do you sell this?
No.
Oh, that's beautiful.
But it's the traditional big corn up front.
Yeah.
The creaminess of that wheat in the back.
Wow. That's impressive. I'm speechless because usually White Dog is almost offensive to a point where, it's just hot.
Right.
And there's a little bit of flavor there. But I think we've talked about this before, is that, if you're not putting a good product in the barrel, aging it is not going to help.
No, if I listen to Tommy Boy, and I love that one skit, if you want me to take a dump in a box and mark it guaranteed, I can do that. I got spare time. But, if you got a good raw spirit in the beginning, it should get better. I don't think the barrel can save it sometimes.
Right.
If you got something that's, sweet and smooth in the start, and it gets sweet and smooth, and it gets that mature value to it, I would think that's where your toffees and your caramels come from, is as those flavor profiles kind of develop.
Right.
If it starts from the good base, I think it's got that chance.
Yeah. One thing I noticed too now that I've had a little sip of water and it's been sitting in my mouth quite a bit. This has not dried out my mouth at all.
No.
A lot of White Dog will just suck the water right out of your mouth. It's almost like a Cabernet dryness.
Right.
This is sticking to the teeth.
Yep.
That's impressive.
It's even in the back of the palate. That sweetness is still, it's your whole mouth feel.
Yeah.
And I notice on this one, I have that coating mouth feel.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, sometimes you get that, even aged stuff, that you get that big smoke and big wood, it sucks all that dryness. It just takes all that moisture out of your mouth. You lose the flavor profile. It just kind of disappears.
Right. No, that's awesome. So that aged for 4 years. 3 years, I'm sorry.
Yep.
Aged for 3 years is the next one, which is the Jimmy's Room Bourbon.
Correct. So that's our 3-year-old Jimmy's Room Bourbon. Actually, this is not the 3-year. This is a 2-year in a 15-gallon cask.
Okay.
That we cut to 80 as our rail. But our retail is a full 3-year and a 30.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Well, cheers. Ooh. So the hotness is gone.
Right.
Obviously. What's the proof on this?
80.
80?
Yep.
But that sweetness is still there. And it's there's a lot more like a baking spice flavor to that.
Yep.
Much more classic bourbon flavor.
Classic bourbon. Got the little smoke on the back end. That wood tannins kind of bite in the back of the palate.
Yeah. It's a little toasted. I like that.
But not over smoke.
No. What level char are you using? Is it
3s and 4s.
3s and 4s? Okay.
Yep.
That's beautiful.
Yep.
Wow. That's good.
And that's a 2-year whiskey in a 15-gallon barrel. So
I would never know. I mean, it's a light colored bourbon, so I guess that might give away the age a little bit. But as far as flavor, this tastes like a premium 4-year plus bourbon. That's phenomenal. And 15, I don't know if this is a gimmick that the industry sells, but I know smaller gallon barrels, sometimes they call it speed aging. It ages a little quicker. Is that something you've encountered? Do you feel it has a different flavor profile because of a smaller barrel?
I think it's because of the smaller barrel and the way that our room isn't temperature controlled.
Sure.
So we have that luxury of those colds and in the hot days. And I think different spots in our aging room affect that also. Concrete floor, open air. Now the big garage door is there for coming in and out, so the AC isn't affecting that room. Right. So it's always doing some sort of fluctuation.
Gotcha.
And I think that has to affect the barrel in some respect.
Of course. I kind of asked this before, but have you experimented with a longer run bourbon? Like, do you have a barrel out there sitting for 8 years just to see what happens?
We do. We actually have some 53s that are sitting just inside the distillery. Cool. And those are the ones people always ask, is that all you have aging here? Is that all you have? How do you run a distillery with 8 barrels sitting in the warehouse.
Yeah.
And I love that because it kind of gets me that setup of there's a green button that opens the garage door to get into the aging warehouse. And a guy that's just on you, that's a guy go push the button. So when he gets to finally push the green button, I call it taking him to heaven. The story about angel share and all that kind of stuff. I haven't pushed the green button and they spin around. It's, oh man, they are here, But those are the ones we're trying to see what age does to our profile.
Okay.
If we keep our hands off it long enough, I think there's 2 of them are going on a 53. There's 2 of them going over 3 years, I think this month or next. So I'm hoping that we can get a 5-year, 6-year, see what happens.
That'd be awesome.
Yep.
How often are you guys tasting out of it just to see where it's at?
I haven't touched them. Those are still sealed from the day they were put in. So
I love that.
Yep. So when those get tasted at a 5-year, that's going to be the first time those things are opened.
Wow.
Once in a while, we forget where a barrel is sitting in the warehouse. So when we get to our spring fever, that's actually a 47-month-old.
Oh, wow.
So that'll be probably one of the oldest whiskeys that have come out of distilleries at 47 months.
Wow. Okay. Very neat. I've heard stories too of craft distilleries that have gotten bought out by other owners, and they find an old barrel in the basement that hasn't been touched and it has a label on it you can't read.
Right.
Crack it open, like, oh, this is
It's something a little special there. Yeah. Got lucky on that one.
I don't know if we can sell this.
Right. We when we do samples out of our barrels, we always have, we pull 100 ml samples and, just tasting to see what's ready, what's not ready,
Sure.
that kind of thing. And when we get done with those samples and have made selections based on those samples, we have these bottles in the back that are called our Hodge barrels, our Hodge bottles. So it's hodgepodge. So everything that came that week that we sampled, it may be 50 mLs of this and 80 mLs of that, but it all goes in that bottle.
Right.
And when I have friends and, family that comes back and what's in a Hodge bottle this time? And I think we got bottle 8.5 and Hodge 9 sitting back there right now. And those end up being some of the best whiskeys.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah. And then my buddy's like, oh, when are you selling this? I'm like, it's kind of a one-off. Well, how can it be a one-off? It's so good. I don't really know what's in it.
Yeah, it's accidental.
Yeah. Accidental perfection almost. It ends up being pretty good stuff.
Right. Oh, that's phenomenal. All right, so what do we have next? What's our third tasting?
So now we're going to one of our first limited releases. This is our Buckshot.
Okay.
Our Buckshot is a 27-month-old white oak barrel.
Okay.
So that's it. That's the base. So that one's actually a base bourbon. Base bourbon, 27 months, then transferred into a barley wine cask for an additional 13. So that one's got a total age of 40 months on it.
Wow. Okay. That's the third.
Yep, number 3.
Cheers.
That barley wine really imparts some depth on that one.
It's a much more rounded sweetness.
Yep.
It's not such a bourbon corn punch in the mouth sweetness. It's more of a red berry, red wine. Oh,
I mean, you can even smell it as it just.
Yeah. And that aftertaste is interesting.
It's got more of that. It's got a bigger char value to it for me almost.
Yeah. It's like a burnt caramel.
Right.
Almost.
And then with almost like a sour beer profile right on the end.
Yeah.
Like I imagine if you walked in the frat houses grabbing those last cans of beer that were sitting around for a couple of days because you were out of beer money for the rest of the week.
Yeah. Just a little bit of funk.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's so different, but in a good way. I love that. This is the wine finish, right?
Yep. So this is our wine finished.
What wine is it? Do you know?
It's a barley wine. So
barley wine.
We
okay.
actually have the winemaker on here. He grabbed the barrel and he aged his barley wine in for 13 months. So we got it back after that.
Wow.
Yep. So that gave us a 40-month total on that guy.
Do you guys get to swap products and say, hey?
All the time.
That's awesome.
All the time. And that's where the fun part of that craft thing is.
Right.
That these barrels are going. I got a guy that was, where was he from? I think he was from Iowa, up here on a weekend vacation and saw our barrels and then saw that we have those limited releases, those double barrels. And he goes, yo, I'm a home brewer. Oh, okay, talk to me. Cause that's interesting,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
That's where the craft thing starts 100%. It's what can you develop in a small scale and then kind of blow it up. And he said, yeah, he goes, I made a beer that ended up winning a gold medal. And it was something I never imagined. It's the first beer the guy ever made. Maybe not the first beer he made, but the first one he was proud of.
Sure.
And decided to put it into a competition. and ended up winning gold. So he goes, what if I want to do a barrel aging with that? And I said, I'll do that.
Yeah.
So I threw him a 5-gallon barrel that was our old bourbon barrel. He's taking it home. He's making up that same award-winning beer, gonna put it in that barrel, and then we're gonna get that barrel back.
What a good idea.
Yeah, so that's great. I love having those conversations because that gives you, and one of the first things I asked the original founder is, how do you come up with ideas? And he goes, trust me, that's not a problem. Finding the time to make these ideas come to fruition is the real problem.
Right.
You know, just that time constraint. So this guy's gonna do some of the work for me, right? He's gonna take that barrel, he's gonna age it up, give it a flavor profile, and then we're gonna put our whiskey back in it. So we're gonna have his gold medal winning beer and see what that does.
Yeah, that's so cool.
And the same thing with our wine guys. You know, we have home wine guys, and we got a couple wineries we work with on a regular basis. You know, and they're always trying new stuff, so that our barrels come out a little bit different every time, a little bit different age on them. So
the patience that it takes to make these things. If you start with a good product and you have this, 40 months is not that long compared to what you think. 6, 7, 8 months. I don't want to wait there. Years. I don't want to wait that long.
I just think that sometimes the industry has kind of poisoned itself a little bit,
Yeah.
saying that, you know, the age snobs are out there, right? I mean, it happens to be because that's the information that we were handed when we first started drinking. If you're not drinking a 6-year, an 8-year, a 10-year, you're drinking terrible products.
Right.
I just don't think that's the case anymore.
No.
I think guys, well, I can show what a 3-year bourbon and a 3-year, you know, specialty age whiskey can really taste like.
Right.
I mean, when I saw, you know, even the White Dog, that's an unaged spirit, and you kind of rose your eyebrows going, well, that's different.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, bottle that.
Right.
All right, what's next?
So the fourth selection there is our another one from a double barrel. That's our Bird Shot. That's actually a wheat. So that's our old 51 wheat mash.
Okay.
Which is another one of our whiskeys. That was aged 26 months in its own charred barrel, and then finished 8 months in a Cabernet barrel. So that's going to be your traditional kind of wine forecast on that one. And that's also from a home wine guy that took the barrel home. So that one's got a total 40-month age on that one.
Okay. I don't know if you're a big wine guy outside of whiskey, but I love whiskey. I'm not that big of a beer guy anymore. Craft beers, I mean, maybe a bourbon barrel aged stout sometimes in the winter, but my stomach has now developed a sickness to beer sometimes. After 2 Miller Lights at a brewer game, I'm kind of like,
for you.
stick to cocktails.
Can't do that. Yeah.
No, but I love wine too. And Cabernet Sauvignon is my absolute favorite.
That's kind of how I went through school a little bit, being part of that the H&T program.
Oh yeah,
They actually had a specialty class that was wine and spirits, and that was taught by a fantastic professor. And after taking the class and doing well in it, I got invited to be a teacher's assistant for the following semester.
Cool.
So that's where my wine kind of love grew.
Okay.
You know, having to being told how different things taste and what to look for, that really opened up your knowledge, and absolutely for everything else, you know, wine and food pairing, you know, whiskey and food pairing, how those profiles come together when you're picking up, you know, like you say, I love listening to some guys that talk about what a whiskey tastes like or what they're smelling.
Right.
You know, you're hearing the toffee note or a caramel note. What does that really taste like? And you can actually train your palate to pick up those nuances, what makes it all more fun. And wine was my avenue for that.
Sure.
You know, having somebody say, do you know what a currant tastes like? Well, no. Who eats currants on a regular basis? But after you do a little bit of research, and then you can look for those nuances in your wine, you can pick those up and you can remember those, or what a blackberry tastes like, or what a sour cherry tastes like. And then thinking about brown sugar in whiskey and caramels in whiskeys and toffees in whiskeys, if you know what those base profiles taste like, picking those up makes the tasting experience so much more fun.
Absolutely. That's one of my joys about this is I have people on too that aren't within the distilling world, and they think they know bourbon. It's like, well, have you had this bourbon?
Right.
Like, whoa,
Right.
what's that?
Right.
Yeah.
Something a little bit different that spikes your interest. That's a lot of fun.
Yeah, not everything's a Buffalo Trace.
Right.
Which is now $100 a bottle for some reason. So, all right. So the cab finished.
Yep. Cab finished.
Oh, that's way different on the nose too. That is very fruited.
And that one has more of that, kind of puts the dryness in your mouth on the back end of that one. I think that's that big cab backer.
That finish almost evaporates right away.
Right.
Which I love. And how long does that age in the cab barrels?
That's 40 months.
40 months?
Or in that cab barrel would be 8 months in
8
a
months
cab.
in the cab, okay.
So 40-month total
Gotcha.
age.
Oh, that's beautiful. And that's cheating. That's so smooth. That's not whiskey.
It's really good whiskey.
Yeah, it really is. It's dangerous. That's what it is. Oh, wow. See, this is why I like bourbons like this. You take the bourbon sweetness that everyone knows, the brown sugar, the caramel, the toffee, the vanilla, but then you do something different with it, and you get so much more nuance and flavors. And I've told everyone that I've talked to this, that I'm a big Scotch fan. I love Scotch whiskey. And one of my favorite party tricks for people who are uninitiated, who think, oh, all Scotch is peated and smoky. Like, no. Most of Scotland is not using peat, actually. But I've always thought that Scotch is more of a complex, nuanced spirit, and bourbon has always been kind of a basic, a 3 or 4 flavor kind of thing. I've since changed my mind. I still, if you're gonna rank them, I think Scotch is probably my favorite. Bourbon is right there next to it, but I've become such a bigger fan of bourbons and ryes now because I've gone to distilleries and tasted different things at quality craft like this. This is eye-opening, like your White Dog.
I think it's funny, or maybe not funny, but fun to see what bourbon has turned into.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started selling, you'd bring a bourbon out to the market, nobody wanted anything to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
My grandpa drank that. And it goes along lines with just about anything you had a really bad experience with. I mean, every drinker that I'm familiar with had a bad experience with tequila, had a bad experience with a terrible rum, had a bad experience with that low-end vodka, probably had a bad experience with a bad whiskey, right?
Oh, I'm sure.
And then to see what it's turned into. When we were buying bourbon, we could get what they call the allocated stuff now, $30, $60 a bottle, and it was everywhere. But now me and my father actually had a conversation not too long ago and said, are we being stupid? And I said to my dad, I said, what do you mean being stupid? And he goes, why aren't we grabbing those $20 and $30 bottles anymore? And I said, that's a fair point. He goes, because when we were grabbing Blanton's at 60, Buffalo Trace at 25.
Right.
We were really catching some cool stuff in the beginning, right? And they were $25 and $30 bottles.
Sure.
So the next blockbuster's out there. Maybe it hasn't been identified yet because these allocations are going to get, the golden ticket, right?
Right.
Go see Willy Wonka, you grab the golden ticket, you get your bottle of Sazerac, something, right? But that's what it's going to end up being. So why not grab these $20 and $30 bottles, put them in a glass, let them breathe a little bit, and do like you did when you first had the first Buffalo Trace and you fell in love with it.
Right.
Or the first time tasting Blanton's and you fell in love with it.
Sure.
Check out those opportunities, the craft side. Don't be afraid that because we don't have the big fancy name that we don't have some really cool stuff in our tasting room. $50 a bottle for a craft bourbon that may become your favorite. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Because that's how we got our favorites to begin with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, honestly, one of my favorite bourbons that I will always have on my shelf for both cocktails and just for sipping is Old Granddad. And obviously Jim Beam bought that name a while back and they make it now, but it's $25 on the shelf.
My father's still favorite go-to bourbon, and it has been, and this was another one. It was by chance. Evan Williams Single Barrel.
Yeah, it's great stuff.
I mean, I remember watching, it was 95 year, 96 year, 97 year, and Dad's going, we already have a 10-year-old bottle of whiskey sitting here, and it was really good. It was really easy to get, and now it's nowhere. You can't find it anywhere.
Nope.
And at that time, another $30 bottle. We grabbed that $30 bottle because maybe the marketing got us. Maybe the bottle was fancy, or maybe the label looked pretty sharp. But we grabbed that $30 bottle and really, really enjoyed it.
Yep.
And now we enjoyed it for a number of years, and now it's another one of those unattainables. So grabbing that cheap bottle and going for it. Old Crow. Some Old Crow stuff was pretty good in the very beginning.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe as a young drinker, not really knowing what you liked, but it got you into it.
Yep.
Right.
Yep. So where I am out in the DC area right now, where I'm living, Virginia is a state controlled. They have their ABC stores and whatever, and they are required by law to sell MSRP. But that means that, of course, they send out a newsletter that says, hey, this month on the 5th, we're going to get a shipment from Buffalo Trace of their Eagle Rare, their Weller's, their Buffalo Trace bourbon. But it's like, okay, cool. So that's going to sell out within minutes.
Right.
It's MSRP. Right. You go across the border into DC or into Maryland, they're the Wild West, just like Wisconsin.
Right.
Which is great. But then the secondary market is like, oh, here's a bottle of Blanton's for $400.
Right.
Here's a bottle of Eagle Rare 7-year.
And has it changed from being the $60 bottle that it always used to be?
No. And that's not to say it's bad bourbon.
No, it's not bad bourbon. For matter of fact, Blanton's was one of my favorite bourbons forever when I could get it.
Right.
And now having a bottle that's sitting in my dad's liquor cabinet right now, and we have a back bottle, and we covet it because who knows if we'll ever see another one again.
Right.
Still maybe one of my favorite bourbons, but I'm of the reality I may never be able to get another bottle because I'm not going on a secondary market and paying $2,000 for it. I'm not getting in a bidding war with some guy that's a collector and maybe not really appreciating what it is, right? It's a $60 bottle of bourbon in reality. Is it worth $2,000? Not to me.
No.
I'll grab the next one in line that's $30, $40. Try that out. Sometimes you find some real dogs, but other times you find one, like we're experiencing here, your first experience with some of these things going, wow, this is pretty good stuff.
Yeah.
And I can get it.
Yeah, right.
That's the exciting part. Yeah. I'm making it. I can get it, right? I know the guy that makes this stuff.
You're going to get a call from me soon. Well, shall we try the last one?
Absolutely. I think this is the one you've been waiting for.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm sweating a little bit.
It's not the fear tier, is it?
No. So tell me about it.
All right. So this is the one that I love it when we have people that come in and say, I'm not a whiskey drinker. My eyes light up because this is that wrench that could possibly get you interested, right?
Okay.
It's like, you're talking about wine.
Yep.
Not everybody, I'm a wine drinker too. I didn't start out with loving my big red cabs, the big deep zins. I started out with, the pop wines, right?
Right.
Big Moscatos.
Yeah.
Big sugar bombs, that gets you're used to as a kid eating sugar your whole life.
Of course.
Candy was your reward if you did something good, right? So this is my avenue to say, you're not a whiskey person, perfect, because this is the one that cheats, right? And it's not a flavored product,
right?
In a sense. I guess it's not even a sense. I mean, by definition, it's not a flavored product. It picks up all of its nuances from the barrel.
Right.
So just like it did as its base spirit, and this one in particular is a bourbon mash. This is actually one of the maple syrup guys we play with all the time. We give him our barrels. He ages his stuff. He sells his barrel aged maple syrups, and we get those barrels back.
Wow.
And this is one, his maple syrup is fantastic. And those nuances come right out of that barrel, right into this bourbon. And it's fantastic.
Oh, man.
So maple syrup finish, not flavored.
Right. That's a big distinction.
Right.
Oh, that's sweet on the nose. Oh, that's phenomenal.
Like I said, cheating, right?
That's cheating.
But it's got all that bourbon, just beautifulness in it. And this is that 47-month-old I was telling you about, probably
The oldest.
I think this is one of the oldest whiskeys that have come out of this distillery. So this is one of those that kind of got lost. It was a 3-year-old bourbon that sat, it was in a char 2, which we do for transfers because char 2s just don't give you quite that finish that you want like a char 3 or char 4 will do.
Sure.
But they're great for transfers. And this one, when it transferred, it was already 3 years. Then it's been an additional just about a year. So giving it that 47-month age profile. And this has become my favorite product in the facility.
I can see why. This drinks like a thinned out maple syrup with a bourbon flavor.
This is the one you sit with your favorite cigar in your comfy chair, big whiskey stone in there, let that thing sit for about 5 minutes and just forget about the troubles for a couple hours, right? This is the one that does that for me.
You're speaking my language. I'm a big cigar guy too. So.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
I'm thinking a big heavy cigar, a big bold like a Toro Fuente, something big shouldered.
Yeah.
With that sweetie pie bourbon sitting on the backside. Just a perfect combination.
Oh, that just sticks to your teeth.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's like a caramel reduction. Like very, very, it's toasty, but also like super, super sweet.
Well, I've had some people that come in from different areas that have had the Miskies.
Yeah.
Their maple syrup, they use that as the base sugar essentially for the distillation.
Right.
And I've had a couple of them that are just, they're rough.
Yeah.
I mean, they're high alcohol. I think you remove wallpaper with some of these. They just don't have the right taste profile for me.
Right.
And like I said, you're allowed your opinion, but sometimes they're wrong. That one doesn't speak to me.
No.
So when I first tried this one, when I first started working here, I had that thought of that Miski that I had with a buddy of mine. And he was so excited. He bought the bottle. He's going, yeah, Jake's a whiskey guy. It's going to be something new for him. He's really going to appreciate this. We both sat down at the same time, opened the bottle, poured the shots for us. And we looked at each other just to see what each other's reaction was. And I don't know if you are with this with your buddies like I am, but you kind of put on the tough guy, like, oh, I can handle this.
Oh, of course.
But then after about, I don't think it was 15 seconds, I looked at him and went, this is terrible. And he looked at me and he goes, I was so excited, but you're right, it is terrible. But then when I first tasted this one, I heard, maple syrup finish. I'm going, oh man, that whiskey thing it rolled in the back of my head.
Sure.
It's like the bad tequila experience or anything else. I'm going, I'm going to hate this. But then tasting is going, oh no, this ain't the same. This is not the same thing.
God, it just sits in your mouth. There's a lot. This is like you could almost, have you done any cocktail experimentation with this?
We haven't had to because it sits by itself so well.
It does.
It would make a great old fashioned, but you wouldn't need much with it.
No, but what my brain goes to is just like a perfect holiday additive, because it almost has like almost a cinnamon and nutmeg on the back end that sweetness is giving.
Right.
For someone who doesn't like a straight bourbon, this would be perfect for putting in a really nice cocktail.
Right.
But you're right though. This is alone, maybe a couple drops of water to take the edge off for someone who's not a big whiskey person.
Right. Right.
Oh,
but this is that one that if you're that beginning whiskey person too, this could open up the portfolio for you.
Absolutely. Because there's no burn.
No.
That's insane. Well,
no.
I'm biased, but
but even in some of the finer whiskeys I've had, I've gotten to the point with tasting our profile and the way that our whiskey sits. I don't like that burn anymore. I mean, I catch some of those heads and tails on some of that big national branding stuff.
Yeah.
We went to Distill America and had a great time there. Got to experience a lot of cool things, but it was quite often that I would taste something and going, I've trained my palate that I'm catching something I don't like anymore.
Right.
And I used to sell them for years.
Sure.
And they were top brands, the things you would recognize. But I'd taste them, even some of my favorites. I taste them again after, learning the distilling trade a little better and learning the nuances of how you get different taste profiles out of your whiskeys and your end products. That there's really things that I don't like in some of that national branding that's out there now. And I guess maybe I'm more sensitive to it because the way maybe our whiskeys finish that don't have some of those things.
That makes sense. Yeah. I'm just out of curiosity because you mentioned it. What do you do with your heads and tails? I've noticed a lot of craft distilleries are using their heads to clean their floors, and they're using their tails to then put back in their gin and their vodka.
Right. We do for like our premium vodka. We use the heads and tails. We actually just stripped one out today. That's going to be our premium. It's I actually play with that quite a bit. So it's going to be, we had 45 PGs to start it.
Yeah.
It's going to be 30 of our bourbon mash and then rye finish. So I put that together, and that's ultimately going to be our end premium vodka after we charcoal filter it out.
Sure.
And it's going to be neutral and sweet and wonderful. But we pay attention to our cuts when we're going through our second distillation process. We know that ethanol ban runs, about 3 hours for us at about 173 degrees.
Right.
So we'll let that run about 10 minutes at the start of it, collect that, and we'll cut it about 10 minutes short at the back end. So we're not getting those, that acetone, that methanol in the beginning, and we're not catching that isopropyl at the end. So we like that heart of hearts cut.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes that continual distillation, you get a little bit of that. And the industry says that that's flavor. But for me and for our profiles, it's not the flavor we're looking for in our end product. So we'll actually collect that, run that as a third distillation essentially, and we'll pick up that little bit of ethanol that we may have left behind, purposely left behind, but then we'll catch that same heads, hearts, and tails again and just pay attention to it and get it back. We're not losing that ethanol ban, we're just picking it up at a later time.
Right. That's awesome. So you do other than whiskey, you do obviously rye is a whiskey, but you do rye, and then you have a vodka and a gin, and then you do a bunch of moonshine too, right?
We actually, I counted it before I started here because I knew I was going to have that conversation or that question. We actually have 35 brands that we're running through this distillery, which is another unique thing for that. I don't know if it's even a unique thing for a craft distilling, but for us, it's unique, and we do it all well. I mean, we have a couple of flavored whiskeys. I'm working on a new flavored whiskey that I'd like to have out this fall. It's a flavor profile that I've had fun working out with. The moonshine line. I mean, that still pays our bills for us when the aged spirits are maturing out.
Sure.
Vodka, gin, specialty bacon jalapeno specialty vodka.
Ooh.
A white pine vodka that we actually harvest the white pine right off the property, peel it up, throw it in gin baskets, throw it through the infusion still.
That's cool.
Yeah, so it's fun. That's the fun part of it.
So I guess last big question before we wrap up. What does the future hold? What can people look forward to from Northern Waters?
Just that new stuff coming. Keep checking us out because the barrels are going to change, right? Our if you like that double barrel profile in our whiskeys, the barrels are going to change. Therefore, the whiskey end is going to change. I said there's a new flavored profile coming out on our wheat whiskey that I'm pretty excited about. The new ownership. I mean, that's just going to be a change in environment, and the cocktails are changing all the time with our mixologist here. I love giving him new things to play with because he pulls out some really cool stuff.
Sure.
So that's where that craft side can really drive it home. We have something that's can be new to somebody every time they walk in.
Right.
Even if it's for a new t-shirt. I mean, even that's kind of fun and cool. If you're not that big drinker, taking home some merch, that's fun.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And still, it's the North Woods, and we got fall coming, so the big colors are coming. That's going to be one of my favorite times of year.
Yeah.
Winter's coming. I mean, it's maybe not my favorite time of year, but the big snow's coming for that crew that's going to be excited about that. So,
well, I mean, you have a beautiful space up here. I mean, we're recording in the distillery, and I'm looking out behind you. The beautiful what's the lake called?
Clawson Lake.
Clawson Lake. I mean, it's a beautiful view. I love northern Wisconsin. I've always loved vacationing up around these parts. So you have an awesome little story to tell here, and I love that. And I mean, there's something to be said about a small little craft operation that is doing great stuff. I mean, you would sell me on everything you said with just the maple bourbon. So,
well, I think I sold you most of it when you hit that white dog right off the front.
Oh yeah, no, I saved a little bit for after. So
yeah, that surprises people when I put them through that.
No,
I love that part of the tour. Taste the white dog because that'll set you up for everything else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jake, what you do here is great. I appreciate you having me here and doing this for me. I appreciate the spirits, and I look forward to what's coming out.
Pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Cheers, man.
Thanks, man.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it if you left us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. The more reviews, the easier we are to find. Also, if you aren't already, be sure to follow us on social media so you never miss any of our updates. Be sure to share this episode with your friends, and always be sure to drink responsibly. There are quite literally thousands of distilleries, so we're just getting started. Stay tuned for more conversations with master distillers, distillery owners, mixologists, and even bar owners, and more. Cheers.